Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Wednesday, April the 9th, 2025. Today I want to talk about a few things. I want to talk about China. Now, I've never really talked about China, and I don't think I've looked at the horoscope of Xi, the General Secretary of the Chinese Communist Party. And there's also the horoscope of China itself that I haven't really spent much time on. And so in this video, I want to remedy that omission by looking at Xi's chart. We're not 100% sure when he was born, but I think we're fairly sure it was June the 15th, 1953, though I don't have a time of birth. And also there is a chart for China, which was declared at 3:15 in the afternoon on the 1st of October 1949. And this, of course, is all in the context of tariffs. And there's a new sort of news about the tariffs. So according to the White House website, it says that there's an announcement about today. President Trump will impose an individualized reciprocal higher tariff on the countries with which the United States has the largest trade deficits. All other countries will continue to be subject to the original 10% tariff baseline. This will take effect April the 9th, 2025 at 12:01 a.m. EDT. So today, April the 9th is when these higher tariffs go into force. And it might be a good idea to look at the exact time in which those tariffs come into play. And all this is taking place against the context of a conjunction between Saturn and Neptune. The Saturn-Neptune conjunction doesn't actually become exact, I don't think, until next year. It gets really close in July. But that is something that I think we do have to look at. But before I look at China and tariffs and Saturn and Neptune, I wanted to take a look at the astrology and the I Ching for today, which is Wednesday, April the 9th, 2025. By the way, if you do happen to like this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to indeed indicate that you liked it. And of course, if you're not subscribed, I would be very happy to have you as a subscriber. So here is the positions of the planets for today at noon on Wednesday, April the 9th. And the moon is still in Virgo. You can see moon is at 1323 Virgo. And that's set for New York. Now, the moon, you can see it's applying to a square of Jupiter. Now, that square to Jupiter is a little way off. It becomes exact U.S. time, sort of in the sort of afternoon, evening, late afternoon, evening, depends on what part of the U.S. you're in. But really, that's all there is. There aren't many aspects today. So that Moon-Jupiter square, even though it doesn't happen until tomorrow if you're in Europe or Asia or Australasia, may be something that we do have to look at, simply because there is really nothing else. There are no other exact major aspects of note. And there are some close aspects. We still have, Mercury is conjunct the North Node. So that, I think, is an important aspect. Mercury has just gone stationary direct, close to the North Node, and with Mercury conjunct the North Node, it is a time to get on with people. It's a time to talk. It's a time to bring our message out into the open, even though Mercury is in Pisces. And that Mercury is making a conjunction to Saturn, so it's just a reminder that it is still close. So it's true that we want to communicate. We do have things we want to talk about, but also with Mercury conjunct Saturn, there is a heaviness there. Some of us might feel that we just can't adequately get our message out into the open, but that conjunction to Saturn is starting to fade. So some of us might have the challenge of getting through those roadblocks, getting past them, and really being open in terms of what we believe in. And Mercury conjunct Saturn can be a little bit harsh. I was what was I doing? So I'm making this video on Tuesday and Monday. Yesterday, I phoned in. I went into Zoom. The city council meetings, in this part of Washington State on Mondays. It's always a city council meeting, and I made my comment. I just thought I had to say something to the city council. I wanted to talk about development and how the environment is getting smashed. It's not just about Trump smashing the environment. It's about people on the progressive left don't seem to be particularly sympathetic to the environment. There's always an excuse, whether it's affordable housing, the homeless, whatever it is. There's been recently this wetland that's in the process of being destroyed to put a tiny homes village on it, and I'm not too happy about that. And I said something. I was just trying to fill up some time, and I used this phrase "unholy alliance" to describe, the forces that want to, that are conspiring to destroy the environment. You've got the property developers, but also you've got these people who think they're helping. They're nice and progressive, but it's all a kind of an alliance of property owners and those who think they're doing some good. You can do anything in the name of affordable housing, apparently. And I use this term affordable housing, and then I was looking at the council members' comments. They got really upset about it. They seemed to be really offended that I'd used this term, unholy alliance. It seemed like I'd hit a raw nerve. And I'm only speaking for 3 minutes, but I just couldn't help myself, could I? And that might be Mercury conjunct the North Node, and sort of me being a Gemini, having Mercury conjunct the North Node, Mercury conjunct the Saturn. I might inadvertently have been a little bit harsh. I didn't mean to be harsh. I just wanted to fill in some time. But anyway, that's what I was doing on Monday, and I communicated something. So maybe I was following my destiny, even though it was quite unconscious. I didn't really want to make a comment, but I thought there was some moral pressure on me to just call in. And so this Mercury Saturn North Node, it may not be exact, but it is very much in evidence, and it's part of what is going on today. And yes, the moon is in Virgo, but the moon in Virgo, it's not doing a great deal apart from that square to Jupiter. And so you could say, with a moon in Virgo, that it is not creating much. So we might put a lot of energy into making things happen, but we may not get the response we're looking for. And it may require a little bit of patience. So tomorrow, Thursday, there is more action, because the moon does make an opposition to Saturn. It makes an opposition to Mercury. It makes an opposition to Venus. Though you might say that those oppositions might be a little bit difficult, and you could argue, but we're already feeling that those oppositions, that the moon may not be exactly opposition Saturn, not exactly opposition Mercury and Venus, but the moon is in the opposite sign of those planets. And so there could be a little bit of tension there, and we should never forget that the moon is the planet, or a planet, of communication. Mercury is one planet of communication, more about sort of mental communication, whereas the moon is more from the heart. It's just how we communicate emotionally. So that's the picture. If I set the chart for New York, if I set the chart for Sydney, Australia, then the moon is earlier in the sign. It's at sort of 8 degrees Virgo, but at 8 degrees Virgo, you can see that the moon really is doing very little. So if you're in Australia and New Zealand, what I've said about a lack of action, a sort of lack of process maybe, is even more intense because the moon is it's not going anywhere. So if you feel that it's difficult to get a response, difficult to make anything happen, well, that's to be expected with the moon in this position. Moon is just early in the sign, not making any aspects. So if you are in Australia or New Zealand or East Asia, don't have big expectations. But on the plus side, maybe nothing's going to happen. Nothing too amazing is going to happen. Maybe nothing too bad is going to happen. And then there is the heliocentric view. So here is the positions of the planets today, with the Sun at the center of the solar system, and Venus is making a square to Pluto. Venus at 1 degree Scorpio, square Pluto at 2 degrees Aquarius. Remember, these are heliocentric positions. Venus may be in Pisces geocentrically, but it's in Scorpio heliocentrically. So Venus square Pluto, there could be a measure of caution here with Venus square Pluto. We want to deal with people carefully. We don't want to reveal too much. Though with Venus square Pluto, there's always the possibility that issues of power come to the fore. Who controls what, and that might be a good reason why some of us might feel that we have to be careful what we reveal. But additionally, Venus is starting to make a sextile to Mars. So over the next few days, there's this heliocentric Venus-Mars sextile, which is, I would have said, a fairly fortunate aspect. It's charismatic, and the right person can get attention. Not everyone. This is a heliocentric sextile. So heliocentric sextiles are more general, more collective than if they were to take place on a geocentric level. But there is a way of expressing ourselves in a way, and if we get it right, we can get attention, and we can get favourable attention. So that's the overall planetary picture. What I'm kind of trying to say is that there is not much going on. I was looking at the ephemeris, and normally there are a few entries, but if you actually look at the entries for today, this ephemeris, Raphael's ephemeris, it uses its Greenwich Mean Time. So if you look at the ephemeris entry for April the 9th, it just says Moon semi-square Mars, Moon parallel the Sun. That's using declinations, and really that's it. So it's incredibly low. So, but as I always say, just because you don't have any exact aspects doesn't mean there aren't any aspects. Though I still think that today, for most of us, there isn't a great deal going on, and it's largely because of the moon. The moon is just not creating much action for us. Okay, in the Americas, we start to feel that moon square Jupiter by the end of the day, but that's all there is. And this, I hope, will be reflected in my forecasts of the 12 signs. I'm really hoping that I say less than usual. So let's look at what's happening today from the viewpoint of the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for today, which is Wednesday, April the 9th, 2025. Aries. Aries, it's a day that may feel a little bit slow, and the reason for this might be that it's just difficult to get noticed, or at least more difficult to get noticed than usual. And that may say something about your focus. If you're honest with yourself, there are things you want to do, and there are details that you are picking up on which you probably feel can't be ignored. I mean, you have ideas about all the exciting things you might want to create and announce, but when you actually try to create active results, things just don't happen, and you may never get to the starting point. If you want to run a race, particularly in a competitive situation, you by and large have to travel to the racetrack. You have to travel to the start line. But Aries, I don't think you'll get there necessarily. And one reason you might not get there is because you notice things. You find that there are other priorities. These priorities might not be very exciting, but they are nonetheless real. So that perhaps is how you should approach the day. And if you're in the Americas, by the end of the day, the moon is starting to make a square to Jupiter. You might be feeling that by this afternoon. And with that moon square Jupiter, you might actually start putting too much energy into things in a way that is just not very Aries. You look at something, you think it might be important, you put a load of mental resources into it, and it takes up an increasing amount of your time. And it's then possible that you could actually get sidetracked on just one thing. And that one thing, which you thought wasn't important, just takes up all your time, and it could be quite exhausting. So it's good that you're attentive to detail, but at the same time, you don't want to take things too far. You do need to look after yourself and your psychological well-being. And if you're an Aries, you don't want to obsess about anything. Though, some things are important. You may not be able to fully communicate how important they are, but they do matter. And actually, it's possible that you have some great ideas today. Great ideas that at the time you can't do anything about them because you've got other things to do. There are other distractions. But these great ideas may say something about the future. Over the next week, for example, you may have an opportunity to start to work on these ideas and to really apply, a great deal of power in their direction. So you are working on several different levels, but the distractions could be quite substantial today, and you don't want to find that you spend so much time on annoying details that you haven't got any time for yourself. And talking about relationships, it's easy to spend time in a way that is reactive today. Just you have to react to this and you have to react to that, and in the process you might forget about some of the important people in your life, and you mustn't forget about them, especially as Venus is still making a conjunction to Saturn, and you may be kind of aware that someone needs a bit of help, a bit of advice, a bit of support, but you don't quite get it together. So it's important, Aries, that you give time to the important people in your life. And, just because someone is not asking for help or assistance doesn't mean that they don't want help and assistance. So a bit of sensitivity in that department would be useful, But you don't want to be oversensitive, because, as soon as you notice something, finally, you're going to want to give it a lot of time. And so you move from one pressure to another pressure, and you do need to make sure that things just don't get out of hand, and you can't do everything at once. You have to, perhaps decide what's important, and as always, make sure that you look after your own interests. And as an Aries, that shouldn't be such a problem, but today it just might be. Taurus. Taurus moon continues moving through Virgo, and with the moon moving through Virgo, it's a time when you can very much be yourself without much pressure, because the moon doesn't really make any aspects in Virgo, at least in this part of Virgo. I mean, tomorrow the moon in Virgo will aspect Mercury, Venus, Saturn. It'll move on to the south node, but today it's not doing much. And there are two ways of looking at it. You could say, well, that is boring. Moon not doing anything. You'd like something to happen. On the other hand, if nothing is happening, that means no pressure. And with the moon in Virgo, you have an opportunity to do something you just like doing. There is no pressure. You can do it how you want. There doesn't seem to be any time limit. And if you want to sort of linger on one thing, you can. And I don't think anyone's going to mind. Though you might be a little bit self-conscious still. Venus is still conjunct your Saturn, and you might be thinking, Taurus, that there's something that you're supposed to be doing. Maybe you're being watched, but you're not. That pressure isn't there. And if it is there, I think that you can safely ignore it. And so that's one way in which the day could run its course, in a very easy way, where just nothing much happens, and that's great. Now, what if you would like something to happen? What if you want to have an impact? Well, in that case, you can. Venus conjunct Saturn can be looked at in many different ways, and that could be, if you really want to, you can be serious, and you can communicate your seriousness. This is something you're not going to let pass. If someone does something that you find offensive or disagreeable, you can certainly make your position clear. And additionally, you know how to create waves. If you want to create waves, I don't think you want to create waves, but if you do, then you can make a scene if you really have to, or you do something that no one's expecting, and it just happens. It's dramatic. There's no warning, and everything changes. So you can do that if you want, but Taurus, I don't think you're necessarily going to be in the mood. And so I think for most Taurians, it's just a time for enjoying your freedom and doing things that you're good at your own pace, in your own way. And if you want to share what you're doing, you can, but I don't think you really have to. Gemini, you probably feel that you don't actually want to do very much. You'd rather not. And a lot of people are like this. It's not just you, Gemini. And one reason might be that you are perhaps more sensitive than usual. And part of you just wants to float along. I mean, why not? and today might have a higher level of fantasy than usual. And there's nothing wrong with fantasy, provided you are aware that it is fantasy. Fantasy can be about one's imagination and imagery, and you get involved in what's going on in your unconscious, and your unconscious is being quite free in terms of creating new ideas and new possibilities. I mean, they might be possibilities, but they might just be nothing. But that doesn't matter. So you can drift along. But what you don't want to do, Gemini, is convince yourself that something is real when it is just plain fantasy. Now, some Geminis could fall into that trap, and you may have to be a little careful when it comes to relationships. Whatever the relationship is about, it's important that you make a special effort to be realistic, and that you don't make any assumptions about another person, that you don't convince yourself that they can necessarily be trusted 100%, or convince yourself that they might have a particular set of feelings for you. I mean, they might, but they might not. And right now, you just have to be aware of that capacity for taking things too far. And for a Gemini, that can be a particular problem, because Gemini, all things being equal, is not a particularly emotional sign. So when you're dealing with stuff that is emotional, you may almost quite literally be at sea, at least emotionally at sea, and you might not know what's going on, and you might lose your logical bearings, and that is something that you really don't want to happen. On a more positive note, Mercury is still very close to the North Node, and with Mercury being so close to the North Node, it continues to be a time where the right path is in front of you, and Mercury is getting closer to the North Node. And so if you're wondering what you should be doing, then in some respects it should be obvious. Don't get sidetracked by your fantasies, and so just look at the available choices, and then I won't say make the right decision, because I'm not convinced that today is a day for making decisions, but you can sort of drift down the right path, because today there is a drifting sense, but you don't want to drift down the wrong path. You start to sort of make a slow commitment, and it all should be clear. And you can, if you want, be tough with yourself. Mercury is making a conjunction to Saturn as well as a conjunction to the North Node. So when it comes to the things that really matter, and Geminis actually do have a set of priorities, that actually can be a criticism of Geminis. Geminis might not appear to have a set of priorities, but actually most Geminis are thinking, well, this thing is more important than that thing, and that thing is more important than the other thing. And this is about categorization, and Geminis are good at categorizing. They often over-categorize. This thing is better than the other thing, and it's always there. And your sense of priority is actually quite strong at the moment. In fact, it should be quite strong, and that, I think, is going to help you to make the right decisions. And just don't give in too much to what other people are suggesting or speculating on. Other people could be a little bit dangerous. especially if you're dealing with them on an emotional level. And you're ever so slightly vulnerable to deception. So do keep people at a slight distance. I think that is important. That if you get it right, if you really focus on what matters, on what your priorities are, then today things should be okay. Cancer, you will probably have a reasonably good day. I think it will be fairly relaxing. I don't think there's going to be a lot of pressure, and if you want to do something, you can. If you want to go somewhere, you can. And there won't be much resistance, but maybe also there won't be much in the way of opportunity. So is that a good thing or a bad thing? It may not be the most interesting day of the week, at least this week, and however hard you try, it just might feel that you're not quite seeing the reaction you were looking for, and you might be slightly bothered by the fact that some people are rather non-committal. You can say things, people will certainly listen to you, but you're wondering, have they really heard you? Are they going to remember what you said? And the answer may be no, but it doesn't matter. You'll have a chance to repeat yourself at a later stage. So as you go about your daily business, it's important, Cancer, that you don't have serious expectations, because today might just be ever so slightly disappointing. Just a feeling that today could have been better. But don't worry. I think all of us, regardless of our sign, are going to be feeling like that, because it is that kind of day. Now, if you are in the Americas, then towards the end of the day, the moon does make a square to Jupiter, and this square to Jupiter could be quite motivating. I mean, it's an aspect. The moon square Jupiter is actually the only major aspect taking place today. And of course, if you're not in the Americas, this moon Jupiter square is tomorrow. But in the Americas, late in the day, moon square Jupiter, you might just finally have something to apply yourself to. It won't be perfect, and you might not feel great about it, but you will get a feeling that at least you're doing something. At least you're trying to make things happen. And it may be about you trying to say something and people haven't been listening. And finally, you may get some kind of response. And even then, it might be quite a half-hearted response. But I must emphasize, it's that kind of day. And you shouldn't take it too personally. Leo, you are feeling slightly out of place, and things aren't as good as they used to be. I mean, I'm talking very short term here. We did have the moon in Leo, and the moon made a trine to the sun in Aries, and it felt that things were starting to happen. But today, it might feel like a step backwards. And it's not really as if anything bad is happening. It's just that the possibilities and the opportunities just seem to disappear. And just as you think that something is going to happen, something is going to go your way, then it just gets taken away from you. And this could happen on many different levels. It might be about money. So if you have any sort of financial ambitions, or you were trying to sort something out financially, then it might not work out, and you may find yourself wasting time. Or at least it will appear that you're wasting time. I don't think you are wasting your time, but it just occurs to you that things take a long time to manifest, and actually getting the universe to create money for you could be hard work, and in the end you might feel somewhat frustrated. And if you're in the Americas, Moon does make a square to Jupiter late in the day, and this Moon square Jupiter might say something about money, and it could be a financial issue that just bothers you, because Jupiter doesn't leave you alone. Jupiter is the planet of excess. So Moon in Virgo is all about details. In your case, it could be financial details, and Jupiter in Gemini could just exaggerate things, and you find yourself just getting worked up about something, and it doesn't really go anywhere. And you do need to accept the situation, and not feel that you have to push it. I mean, some Leos might want to push things over the course of the day, feel that they just need to get action. Any action will do. And that would not necessarily be a good idea, because like yesterday, there is some danger that you get involved in something that is just not particularly healthy. So yeah, if you want something to happen and you really try hard, you can make something happen, but really, is that what you want? And some things are just left alone. Sorry, some things are best left alone. And so what could happen, Leo, is you stir something up, almost without thinking, but maybe at an unconscious level you're looking for excitement, or you're looking for something to just stimulate your mind. But you stir something up, and once you stir it up, it's difficult to get it to go away. It just stays there, and it could cause persistent problems, and it could take up a lot of your time and your energy. So if something is dormant, then leave it alone, or as they say, let sleeping dogs lie. One other thing, Leo, is that the Sun is starting to make a conjunction to Chiron, and this Sun conjunct Chiron will be exact in a few days' time, but perhaps you're already starting to feel it, and this Sun conjunct Chiron may help explain some of your frustration. You do feel that you should be doing something, that you should be doing things differently. And if you were to do something differently today, as I think I've already tried to suggest, things could end up being quite difficult because you're stirring stuff up. But with Sun conjunct Chiron, do be aware of how you are different and how you see things differently, and it's something you need to work on a bit, because the time for action, the time for really getting into that Sun conjunct Chiron hasn't quite arrived, and today, not at all. You need to be careful, and if Chiron is a maverick, that's the last thing you want to be. I mean, you can be a maverick in terms of what you're thinking and your planning even, but not in terms of your behavior. I don't think today mavericks are going to be appreciated. Virgo. The moon continues to trundle through your sign, and in general, that's a good thing. Moon in Virgo, you are a Virgo, and you have a good awareness of what's happening around you, and you're also benefiting from the fact that Mercury is now stationary direct. Yes, it really is. A couple of days ago, it it did come to a standstill, and now actually it's starting to gather a little bit of speed. And with the moon also in Virgo, that really helps. And so I think Virgo, it may be a case of slow improvements. You can see that things are getting better, but you shouldn't be in too much of a hurry, because if you are in a hurry, then things may not go to plan, and they might not go to plan not in a necessarily in a dramatic way. It just, there isn't the support there. So you may not, for example, get the help you're looking for, and people may not appreciate what you're doing. And so you can initiate things, you can be involved in things, but don't assume you're going to find a solution or an end result. It's just going to take time, and you shouldn't feel that it's all about the end of a matter. It's just the fact that you're doing things. And as the day progresses, especially if you're in the Americas, the moon starts to make a square to Jupiter. And this square to Jupiter, you could say, is the only aspect taking place today. And this square to Jupiter is exact. Well, if you're in the UK, for example, it's exact at 1:04 tomorrow morning. So even in the UK, this moon Jupiter square is pretty marginal, unless you're talking about this evening. So if you are in UK, and probably Europe as well, you start to feel that moon Jupiter square over the course of this evening. Whether or not you'll be able to benefit from that moon square Jupiter kind of depends on who you are. If you're a night owl and if you're up late, then I think that the moon square Jupiter could actually be quite useful. If you're in the Americas, then arguably you've got the moon square Jupiter all day, and it just is building up as the day progresses. And this moon square Jupiter does allow you to think about your ambitions, what you're trying to do, what you're trying to accomplish, and you're going to be able to do valuable preparation. And as the day progresses, the things you're doing will make more and more sense. And to start with, you may be wondering what you're doing, but as moon square Jupiter becomes exact, then it's becoming clear. And the moon Jupiter conjunction, so moon Jupiter square, well, it becomes exact at 5:04 p.m. if you're in California, or that would be 8:04 p.m. if you're on the East Coast in New York. And so that actually could be quite lucky. So American Virgos, there is an opportunity to really make an impact and to harness your energy and your sense of detail, and to combine it with your ambition. But you do have to work on it. And then there's relationships. Virgo, it is a time when relationships are important. There are a lot of planets in Pisces still. We've still got Venus, Saturn, Mercury, North Node in Pisces. So it's difficult not to think about relationships, especially when you've got Mercury conjunct the North Node in Pisces. That is, broadly speaking, the direction you should be moving in. You don't have to do things alone, and if you can involve other people in with what you're doing, that's definitely right. It's absolutely the correct approach. But you have to be a little bit careful, because at the moment there is some danger of being a little bit naive, assuming that someone will honor their promises, assuming that if you just let someone take something over. You want something done. You say, well, okay, you go and do it, assuming that they'll just go and do it. I don't think that's an assumption you can make. And there is some danger that another person lets you down. And part of the problem is you just want to believe that they're not going to let you down. And so if you are entrusting another person with something important, you've got to monitor them. And you've also got to monitor your own feelings, because your own feelings may be a little too fantasy oriented, especially when it comes to other people. You might want to believe things which are simply not true. And so, be a Virgo about it. Be realistic, be grounded, and also look at someone's behavior. Don't just listen to what they say and what they promise. If you listen to their behavior, if you look at their behavior, look at their track record, then it might be easier to decide who can be trusted and to what extent they can be trusted. Libra. Well, I've talked quite a lot about Venus conjunct Saturn, so I probably don't need to say anything more about it. But in a general sense, you are perhaps being a little bit cautious at the moment. Venus is your ruler, and you can't do everything, and you're pretty aware of your limitations, and that's the way it should be. And if you don't take on too much, then there's not much to worry about. Additionally, as far as today is concerned, there's not a great deal that can be achieved. You might feel that you should be making some effort, but it's just going to be hard. You try, but at some level you're not really in the mood, and this can apply to your approach to other people. Maybe you need other people to be helpful, to be with you, to be supporting, but you're not interested really. And it might feel that if you're talking to people, you're with people, you just haven't got the enthusiasm, and they haven't got the enthusiasm. And one reason they might not have the enthusiasm is because you don't have the enthusiasm, and so nothing can happen. And if nothing happens today, then you should not be disappointed about that fact. It's just the way it is. And if you try to push people too far, then will you get a satisfactory result? Possibly not. And one aspect we've got today is we've got the sun making an opposition to true black moon Lilith. So true black moon Lilith, is at 20 degrees Libra. The sun is at 20 degrees Aries, and so that might be a reason why it isn't satisfactory. You find that other people are reflecting your own concerns and even your own darkness, and that might say something about relationships with sun opposition true black moon Lilith. If you really do get too close to another person, there could be a lot of projection, and their behavior may not be what you'd expected, and it might be quite off-putting. But if you're honest with yourself, what you're seeing could be a reflection of who you are. And some Librans with true black moon Lilith at 20 degrees Libra, they may be having thoughts and ideas that may be a little bit disconcerting. So do be aware of those thoughts being projected and you just seeing them in another person's behavior. So it's a day that you could say, well, it's not really anything to write home about. Though, if you feel, Libra, that you need something to happen, that you absolutely must have something happening, then you can make it happen. But you have to ask yourself, is this really what you want? Is it really worth it? And 9 times out of 10, it probably isn't worth it. But there is a red button. There is a red button you can press, and you will or could create fireworks. And everyone will just know that you're there, you're present, and they're ready to listen to what you have to say. But is that what you want? I think, Libra, the answer to that is probably not. Scorpio. Scorpio, it's a downbeat day for many of us, regardless of our sign. And this may just be something you notice. And it's not your problem. And you shouldn't necessarily be influenced by it. You've got your own path to follow. And, if we look at what you are doing, then I think that you're actually not in too bad a position. I have been rather negative to a lot of the signs, or rather I've been negative about describing the 12 signs so far. But I think, Scorpio, for you, things should be fine. It's a day when you probably have a considerable amount of freedom. You can do pretty much what you like within reason, and your social skills seem to be fine. You can mix with people. You shouldn't expect too much from them, though, and that might be something you notice, that if you talk to people, talk to friends, associates, you maybe even go out to visit people, it's all very harmless, it's all very innocuous, but just something missing. And it might be ever so slightly frustrating. It's no one's fault. It's not your fault. It's not their fault. It's just a situation one is in. But it is possible, Scorpio, that you can take advantage of the situation. You are at the moment quite a powerful person. I mean, you're always a powerful person, but at the moment, your power is probably stronger than usual, and you are quite determined when you want to be, and you have a certain vision about the way things could be, and that determination is going to be clear. The longer people hang around with you, they realize that you do have this power, and I think they might appreciate it because there's nothing else going on. Maybe, Scorpio, you are the only thing going on for some people today. And yeah, that does give you an advantage. And additionally, Scorpio, you should not underestimate your own ideas. You have some really good ideas at the moment. And these ideas are, they're coming thick and fast. And people are prepared to listen to them. They may not appreciate them straight away, but you're going to be a hard person to ignore. And additionally, from a heliocentric view, Venus is making a sextile to Mars. And so that Venus sextile Mars does give you a certain amount of attractiveness, and people do notice you. So, if there's something you want, and there's an impression you want to make with this Venus sextile Mars, I think that is something that you very much can do. So that goes back to what is today about, and the fact that for so many people it's just uninteresting. There's nothing happening, and you're the solution. You can be the solution. You can turn yourself into the solution, and that will give you extra power. So it's a time when you can actually seize the advantage and because you are taking advantage of the fact that other people are listless. They don't know where they're going. They're not quite sure what they want. But at least in a relative sense, you're the one with the power. Sagittarius, it's a day that I'm not particularly impressed by. I mean, in fact, when I was working out, what I was going to say today, when I was thinking about this video, sometimes these videos go on for 2 hours, and I was thinking, am I really going to be able to go on for 2 hours? Or even an hour and a half, because there just doesn't seem to be much going on. And I look at the ephemeris and I see what planetary aspects there are, and there isn't really much going on. And so that was a bit of a concern. And as far as you're concerned, you may feel that today could be a little bit empty, that there's no action, there's no contact. And that's especially the case early in the day. If you're in the Americas, it's a little bit different. Things do pick up late in the day as the moon starts making a square to Jupiter, but still it may be difficult to make things happen. And that is a negative way of looking at things. There is a positive way of viewing today, and you might say, well, there's not going to be much resistance. And so that gives you a fair amount of freedom, and it gives you the freedom to do what you want, but also to start to be ambitious, to spread your wings, to decide where you want to go, and to take those first steps, and also to get very little in the way of resistance. And that's the issue. Sometimes if there's no resistance, it sounds good, no resistance, but if there's no resistance, then you're thinking, well, this is just too easy. But that's fine. If things are easy, well, one just go for it. Even if no one is listening to you, no one is paying attention to you, but no one is resisting you. So maybe, Sagittarius, you should just go with it. And if you don't run into any resistance, well, that's great. Though in the Americas, the moon does make a square to Jupiter in the end, and that moon square Jupiter is really the only geocentric aspect of note taking place today. And so London time, of course, that moon Jupiter square is tomorrow. And everywhere else outside the Americas, it's tomorrow. In London, it's at 1:04 a.m. on Thursday. And so if you are an American Sagittarian, or if you're a European Sagittarian but you're staying up late, or an African Sagittarian staying up late, then that moon Jupiter square will start to have an impact, and the resistance may come from another person, perhaps because you're giving someone else a chance to comment on what you're planning on doing. So as soon as you give people a chance to resist, to question what you're doing, as you move through the day, they may start to activate, and you may, in the end, find that there is actually very real resistance to it. And it's a kind of resistance that shouldn't be a showstopper. It's an opportunity to really think about what another person is saying and getting some feedback from them, because at some level that's what you want. If you're not getting feedback, well, it all feels rather empty. And so maybe that's what Sagittarians should be doing, looking for some response. And you may spend all day looking for a response, looking for the universe to tell you something. And in the end, you get the feedback you're looking for. You may not entirely like the feedback, but at least it's feedback. At least it shows that there is something out there. Capricorn. Capricorn, you are really in quite a good position, certainly relative to other people. A lot of other people don't know what they're doing. They're walking around in circles. They feel clueless, and that means that you can do to a great extent what you want, and there isn't going to be a great deal of resistance. I said something actually quite similar to Sagittarius. Sagittarius and Capricorns are fairly different signs, but you do share that with Sagittarius, that I just don't think there's going to be much resistance today. And also Sagittarius, like yesterday, I think that your fundamental abilities are very clear at the moment. And as I was telling you yesterday, it's just not it's not a time, Capricorn, where you need to be modest, or indeed where you should be modest. And this is especially the case when you consider what's happening around you, because other people they don't know what's best for themselves. They're looking for something, and it's quite possible that you're able to provide it, and through your intelligence and your imagination, you can show people a different way of doing things, and it could in its own way be rather impressive. So Capricorn, just absolutely do not underestimate yourself, and also don't worry about being a bit experimental. Capricorns have a reputation for being quite sort of staid and following the rules and not wanting to rock the boat. I mean, that is a false impression, but it is just a stereotype of Capricorns. And today, if you are experimental and if you explore new things, then you're going to make discoveries. The discoveries might not appear to be dramatic, but you're giving yourself an opportunity to just expand your field of operation. And also, you might realize that something you thought was no good, was never going to work, actually could work if you just gave it the chance, if you were perhaps able to sort of experiment with it. And that can often be the problem with practice. You want to know if something works, but you never have a good opportunity to actually give it a go, because there's too much pressure, or you're feeling self-conscious. But maybe today is the opportunity. Today might be the opportunity to try something you've never done before. And the reason you might have that opportunity is because there won't be much resistance. And if something does go wrong, you thought you might be able to get away with something, you might be able to pull something off, and if it just happens not to work, it doesn't matter. I mean, okay, it depends what you're trying. I'm not suggesting you do anything that's dangerous or safety critical, but don't be too afraid of failing or embarrassing yourself, because it won't be an embarrassment. Probably no one will notice. And if something doesn't work, then of course you have a chance to reconsider what you're doing, do some fine-tuning, and you have another go at it and another go at it, and then finally you might actually realize that you've got the right formula. So, it is a great day for trying things out, and there is the real possibility that you're able to completely demonstrate that you got something sorted out, that something that you thought was a waste of time, was just a dormant talent, is actually something very real. So do make the most of it, because the inaction of today, and the fact that other people are just unenthusiastic about most things, could actually work to your advantage. Aquarius. It's possibly one of those days when maybe I didn't really have to make this video, at least from a viewpoint of the 12 signs, because I really don't think that a lot is going on. And when not a lot is going on, that means that we have choices, and why use astrology to constrain one's possibilities. But the moon is in Virgo. Moon is not doing a great deal in Virgo, and with the moon in Virgo, Aquarius, it's possible that you are being a little more introspective than usual, not quite your normal self. I mean, Aquarians are quite capable of being introspective. They have their own way of doing things, but there is this introspective pull, and that might have an emotional element to it. You feel that it's just not quite the right time to be doing anything, and it's best to just hold back and just let the thing develop, and later you can work out what's going on. But is such an approach necessary? Well, it's good to be cautious. Nothing wrong with being cautious, and you certainly you don't want to take risks, but also you have to be aware of what is possible, and what you can do. And Aquarius, there is some possibility that today you underestimate yourself, and it's just the kind of atmosphere where we're in, where people underestimate themselves. They don't think there's a point, but for you, there is a point, and you actually you've got a lot of resources available to you, and there's a lot you can do, and there's a lot you can do to be of assistance. People will appreciate you being around, and additionally you've got good advice to give. And so a lot of people need good advice. They're not very good at asking for advice, because it's that kind of day, but it may then be a situation where you have to impose advice on people. If they don't ask for advice, but they may still want to know something, they may want to know what to do, and perhaps, Aquarius, you have to recognize the situation and understand what people need to hear. And it does seem that some people have some quite strange ideas, and they may actually be excessively negative. And one reason for that is the fact that the sun today is opposition true black moon Lilith. So the sun in the Aquarian chart, of course, it rules Leo, your opposite sign, and so with sun opposition true black moon Lilith, that could be representative of someone having real concerns, really being worried about something that is quite unconscious. It could be very psychological, and they can't quite get out of it. And maybe, Aquarius, you can do something about it. I mean, that's one possibility. Though we have to look at another possibility, especially when dealing with people who you don't know very well, are just starting to come into your life. Sun opposition true black moon Lilith may represent a person who is beyond the pale, is someone who you should absolutely stay away from. So that is a possibility, and you need to be alert to that possibility. You know, if you're having a busy day, if you're meeting lots of different people, there may just be someone you meet who you don't really want to meet. So that is a possibility there with Sun opposition true black moon Lilith. But I don't want to dwell on it. I think in most cases you can do things which are useful, and people will just appreciate you, and there won't be any bad consequences. And additionally, you have good financial instincts, I think, at the moment, and you just have an idea about what is possible and what is dangerous, and it would be a good time to be giving yourself financial advice. So if there's anything financial that you're concerned about, you can actually sit down and look at it and use your detached logic to actually work out the best approach. But that might also apply to other people and how you relate to them, that you can deal with another person's financial issues. I mean, not provide all the answers, but you can certainly provide pointers. So, you know, that is another way in which people can just benefit from your presence. Pisces. Moon continues moving through Virgo, and I said yesterday that the moon doesn't really make many aspects at the beginning of Virgo, and it's the same as the case for today. I mean, all of the main aspects happen sort of late in the sign, though the moon does make a square to Jupiter. Now that moon square Jupiter is particularly relevant if you're in the Americas. If you're in Australia, New Zealand, well, that moon square Jupiter is about tomorrow. If you're in Europe, moon square Jupiter is going to be much later in the day, because the moon square Jupiter in London, for example, isn't exact until I think 1:04 in the morning on Thursday. So, like yesterday, other people are there. You are aware of other people's presence. You are aware of the kind of pressures they might at some stage present. But is anything actually going to happen today? Probably not. Other people are about potential, but not necessarily action. And so don't spend too much time preparing for something, assuming that someone is going to do something, because they might not, and that would just be a waste of time. So it's just about maybe making yourself available, but not making yourself too available, because you've got other things to do. I mean, you've got other things to do in a gentle way. I don't think today is about anything actually having to be done. Now, that moon square Jupiter is especially relevant if you're in the Americas, because that moon square Jupiter, well, it's going to be exact at 5:04, just after 5 o'clock in the afternoon if you're on the West Coast in, say, British Columbia or California or Oregon or Washington State. It will be exact 3 hours later if you're in New York, or the East Coast. That would be exact at, what would that be, 8:04 in the evening. So in the Americas, things just may get more active as the day unfolds, and by the evening it is possible that there is a situation that requires your attention, and it might be at home, but it just might be someone else. Someone requires help, or it could be just someone providing a distraction or even a disturbance, because that moon square Jupiter, a square is a stressful aspect. So that moon square Jupiter, Pisces, could be about someone, particularly if you're in the Americas, late in the day, somehow disturbing your peace of mind. They make an appearance, they make a phone call, they send you an email, and it's not really something you necessarily wanted to hear, but it's a square, it's not an opposition, so it's not the end of the world, and you don't want to be, over dramatic about it. Though, it is possible that, something happens which moves a relationship on. And okay, it might happen tomorrow if you're in Australia, for example, but something could happen which changes things within a relationship, and it's a surprise. And it could be a fortunate surprise. You start to see someone in a new light, and you may realize that in the future this person could actually play a useful role in your life. And so, be open to that possibility. But, overall today, Pisces, I don't think that a great deal is happening. And that's a message I've been giving to everyone pretty much. And those are my forecasts for the 12 signs. And now I want to have a go at looking at today from the viewpoint of the I Ching. And I say have a go because I do feel that my forecasts for the 12 signs astrologically were somewhat unsatisfactory. So my apologies there, but I am influenced by what is happening astrologically, and just astrologically, today just felt it was just a bit flat, really, because of this, because of the fact there just wasn't a great deal happening. So as far as the I Ching is concerned, these are my forecasts. Sorry, let me start again. I asked the question: what is Wednesday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 54, which is the marrying maiden. And the marrying maiden, the symbol we have is of a young woman, a girl who is in a hurry to get married, and she wants to make that connection. She wants to perhaps impose herself on someone else's household, and her hurry is somewhat improper. It's not the right way to behave, and this may say something about today, and it needn't be about relationships. You want things to happen, and you want to push things, and there is a certain sense of impatience here. But from an astrological point of view, as I've been trying to make clear, that there isn't much going on today, and so there could be some frustration there. You want to kind of push it. The planets aren't being helpful, but let's see what we can do. Let's see what we can squeeze out of today. And it is hard work, and it's probably a waste of time. And the marrying maiden is really saying, well, don't be in too much of a hurry. Now, there are 3 moving lines. So first line moves, second line moves, and the fourth line moves. So with the marrying maiden, it's a hexagram which, by and large, is not especially fortunate. But the moving lines aren't actually too bad. And the bottom line moves. And so with the bottom line moving, it indicates someone who is in a low position. And because they're in a low position, there's low resistance. So there's not much pushback on what one is trying to do. And so this is kind of what I was saying with the moon not really making many aspects. There isn't much resistance. So we can be low, we don't get noticed. It can be a bit distressing not getting noticed, but we're able to make good progress. It's not spectacular progress, but we can actually make something happen. And what we have to do is, the second line moves, it's about being loyal. And even if one's loyalty seems to be totally misplaced, the symbol here is about being loyal to a person who may not be there, a person who might even be dead. The I Ching, I think, talks about the position of a widow, the marrying maiden, and so the husband is dead, but she still has this loyalty to the husband. So it's that kind of loyalty. It's a loyalty that seems to be a waste of time, but actually it's real and it is of value. And then the fourth line moves. The fourth line really is quite fortunate, because of what the fourth line is saying. In the end, one gets what one's looking for. In terms of the marrying maiden, the image one has is of a woman she's prepared to wait for the right person, and she's virtuous, and in the end she gets what she's looking for, but when the time is right. And so this hexagram, it needn't be about relationships, it's about whatever we're trying to achieve. We aren't getting results. It is a slow day, as I've really tried to express when going through the 12 signs. It is a slow day, and if we're patient, in the end we start to attract good luck, and we finally get to be successful, but it just takes longer than expected, and that's okay. And so we got 4 moving lines, and that means that we move to a different hexagram. Now, if you look at the we had 3 moving lines. So the bottom line moved, the second from the bottom line moved, and the fourth line moved. In other words, all of the unbroken lines move. So that means that the hexagram we move to is hexagram number 2, which is the receptive. And that is pure negativity. It's I always get yin and yang mixed up. That's yin. Yin is pure negativity, the receptive, and that's the approach we should be going for. We don't have to initiate anything, and that links up with the astrology so well. I've really made it clear that I just don't think much is going on today. But almost looking at your sign is almost a waste of time, because there isn't much going on. But when there isn't much going on, we do have a fair amount of freedom. So be receptive. Don't feel that you have to initiate anything. It's not the right time, and you can just observe, take notes, and just see where things are taking you. I mean, you've got to have some level of resistance if you're being taken to a bad place, but I don't think that's going to happen. And so just let things unfold, and you can watch other people behave, you can see what other people are doing, you can also see what other people are not doing, and that will allow you to make decisions at a later stage. But now is really not a time for action. So I do think that the I Ching has really reflected what's going on with the astrology. So now I want to start, before I look at China in detail, well, not that much detail, but I wanted to look at Trump's statement about tariffs. And a lot of people have been getting really excited about April the 9th. They're saying, well, this is the day it really happens. this is the way, this might be the day when the markets drop, when we see the real impact of tariffs. And, just a reminder of what was on the White House website, which I'm just going to repeat what I said at the beginning of this video. It says, President Trump will impose an individualized reciprocal higher tariff on the countries with which the United States has the largest trade deficits. All other countries will continue to be subject to the original 10% tariff baseline. This will take effect April the 9th, 2025 at 12:01 a.m. EDT. And here is a chart for April the 9th, 2025 at 12:01 EDT. And there is something rather amazing about this chart. It has 12 degrees 56 Sagittarius. It has the angles of the United States. So here is the United States chart, the chart that is used, most of the astrologers like to use, 5:10 p.m. On July the 4th, 1776, and the ascendant is 1221 Sagittarius. And so going back to the chart when the higher tariff comes in, we've got 1256 Sagittarius. So this time is very much about America and what America is doing. And Jupiter's in Gemini. Ruler of the first house is in the seventh house, and of course the United States at the moment has Jupiter in the seventh house. So it is about conflict, and it's about it's about America's trading partners, and yes, it's about those countries that the United States has a high trade deficit with, and I suppose we're thinking about China in particular. And so that's one aspect of this chart. But also we've got the moon at 7 degrees 19 Virgo. So the moon is very much about process and about action. And so with the moon moving through early Virgo, if you'd listened to my 12 signs, I just don't think much is going on today. It is a dramatic chart, but is it a dramatic chart at the time? The moon's next aspect is a square to Jupiter, and the moon is in the ninth house. I mean, that's where you'd expect the moon to be. Ninth house, foreign countries. Yes, it makes that square to Jupiter in the end, but it's not actually making any aspects right now. So is April the 9th going to be a completely dramatic day? I'm not convinced. Now, that doesn't mean to say that the stock market isn't going to collapse. Well, I'm making this video on Tuesday. Of course, it is designed... I'm making it... So let's make that clear. I'm making this video Tuesday. Well, at the moment, it's 8:57 a.m. on Tuesday, the 8th Pacific time. So if you're in Australia or New Zealand, of course, it's nearly Wednesday, and as people watch this video, the day will be progressing, and so in other words, I don't know what the market's going to be doing on Wednesday, even though I'm talking about Wednesday. But with the moon in that position, I don't think that we should necessarily expect immediate fireworks, even though I do think in many respects it is a dramatic chart. And one reason it is dramatic is the position of Neptune. Neptune is at 0 degrees 21 Aries. And of course, the midheaven in this chart for the higher tariffs is at 0 degrees 57 Libra. And so that is the midheaven of the United States, because this is taking place at the same... This chart has the same angles as the United States. So Neptune is on the IC for the United States. Neptune is on the IC in this chart. And the Neptune on the IC is about the breakup of, in many respects, the foundations of America. Now, that doesn't mean, though, that it's bad. I'm not entirely convinced that these tariffs are going to be as bad for America as some people make out, as I discussed in, I think it was yesterday's video. But with Neptune on the IC, it is a big event, and it does break things down. It breaks down the framework in which America was the center of. You could say represents the whole sort of Bretton Woods system. Just a reminder that here's the United States' chart, and let's get the right chart here. Let's just put the higher tariff chart. Let's put the USA chart with the higher tariff chart. So if you put the charts side by side, or the US chart in the middle with the same angles, you can see that the angles are really close, and there is Neptune right moving onto the United States' IC. So there is a drama there, and also the United States does have its Chiron return. Chiron return, you might say, Chiron is about, well, Chiron is the maverick. Chiron in Aries. United States, Trump is certainly being a maverick, and we have a Sun Chiron conjunction just about to take place, and the Sun is going to be, well, in fact, the Sun is just about on the United States' Chiron, and so I think this aspect from the Sun to Chiron does illustrate the maverick nature of what the United States is doing. There's no doubt about it. And if you are being a maverick, you are confounding expectations. People had assumed that America will behave in a particular way, but with Trump, they're clearly not. So I do think that this really is a big event, and we're hearing a lot about China, and so I thought I would mention China and say a few words about it. And I haven't really looked at China's chart, and I haven't looked at Xi's chart. So China here's China's horoscope. So China is of course, we're in this sort of potentially escalating tariff war between the United States and China, and China came into being on October the 1st, 1949, and at 3:15 p.m., according to Nick Campion. He was quoted, he co-wrote this book, Mundane Astrology, an introduction to the astrology of nations and groups. So we'll go with 3:15 p.m. That was when Mao made the announcement, and China came into being with 5 degrees 57 Aquarius rising, and so China has the moon at 3 Aquarius moon rising, and China has got a moon trine sun, which is always a useful aspect to have. Now, what is really important at the moment? Well, there are a couple of things that are important in the China chart. Firstly, Pluto is moving across China's ascendant, and let's just look at China compared to the higher tariffs. So if we put China in the middle wheel and the higher tariffs on the outer wheel, so Pluto is about to hit, well, already has hit China's moon. Now Pluto does go retrograde, so Pluto will make a transit to China's moon later in the year, already has done, and that may say something about China and its place in the world. It could also say something about China and its people and its populace, and Pluto is also the planet of control. And so maybe China is having to do a lot of hard work in trying to control its population. Because with China, we get these mixed messages, two completely mixed messages, two messages which completely conflict. One view is that China is the future. China's got it all sorted out. China knows what it's doing. China is thinking 100 years ahead. There is another view that China is falling apart. And very often that view is, there's a certain sort of American chauvinism and arrogance to it. Or maybe not American, just a Western chauvinism and arrogance that thinks that China, in the end, it will fall apart. And so we've got these two totally different views. Either it's collapsing, or it is the future. Which one is which? I'm not going to speculate at the moment. And so look at Uranus also. With these tariff wars, you've got the United States with Neptune on its IC, transiting Neptune on its IC, and you have got China with transiting Uranus on its IC. I think that Uranus on the IC for China is certainly worrying for the country. I think that does indicate real turmoil, and this is not an event astrologically that I think the Chinese will be paying attention to. Even if they do listen to astrologers, they will presumably be Chinese astrologers, and I don't know what is showing from a perspective of Chinese astrology, because I'm quite good on Western astrology. I have some awareness of Vedic astrology, but when it comes to Chinese astrology, I'm a complete ignoramus. So I don't know what they would be looking at, but I suspect the Chinese Communist Party isn't too concerned about Chinese astrology. And so that Uranus on the IC in China's chart would, I think, really very much be something to worry about. And look also at the midheaven. So that's the midheaven of the Tariffs. So sorry, forget that. So those are a few thoughts on China. These are first thoughts on China. I haven't really looked at the Chinese chart before, and it's a chart that I'll be looking at in greater detail in future videos. But I kind of wanted to introduce the China chart. And the head of the Chinese Communist Party, the general secretary of the Chinese Communist Party, is, apologies for my pronunciation, is Xi Jinping. And so here is Xi Jinping's chart, and I have a picture of Xi Jinping. Now, we don't have at least I don't have a time of birth for Xi Jinping. There's even a possibility that his date of birth may not be right. So I can't guarantee that he was born on June the 15th, 1953, but Wikipedia says it was June the 15th, 1953, and so I'm going to go with that. And so I've gone for noon, Beijing time, and so he's a Gemini. Donald Trump was born on June the 15th, 1946, so they were born sort of exactly 7 years apart. And so, they're both Geminis. And Xi Jinping was born with a fairly close Saturn-Neptune conjunction. And I think that is important, because this year Saturn and Neptune get really close to one another. So that Saturn-Neptune conjunction, the closest it gets is, I make it on July the 13th, 2025. That's when Saturn goes retrograde. It doesn't actually make the exact conjunction, but this is where Saturn goes retrograde here. So within, about for quarter of a degree of Neptune. And so going back to Xi Jinping, because he has got a Saturn-Neptune conjunction, quite a close Saturn-Neptune conjunction in his chart, it's reasonable to think that Xi Jinping is quite receptive to the Saturn-Neptune cycle, and that's something you should consider doing in astrology. And when I did my in the 1980s, I did a course in midpoints and harmonics at the Faculty of Astrological Studies, and the man teaching his course, Mike Harding, he wrote Working with Astrology, which is co-wrote it with Charles Harvey. He pointed this out, that when you've got a very close aspect in your chart, you should really look at the cycle of those two planets. So if you've got a very close Saturn-Neptune conjunction in your chart, you should be looking at potentially at the Saturn-Neptune cycle. So aspects between Saturn and Neptune, even if they don't transit your chart directly, could have an impact on you. And so Xi Jinping, with this Saturn-Neptune conjunction, he's going to be influenced by this, I think. And so I know that Xi Jinping has this sort of image of someone who's very organized and together, and he knows what he's doing, but he has his vulnerabilities, and that might be reflected by the Saturn-Neptune conjunction and the fact that this year and next year you've got Saturn-Neptune conjunctions coming up. And so that could have quite a negative impact upon him. Also, Mars, he's got Mars at 0 degrees 40 Cancer. So 0 degrees 40 Cancer is it's right on the solstice point. And so Neptune and Saturn, when they move into Aries, I mean, Neptune's already in Aries, will start making a square to his Mars. And this might mean that there may be moments over the next year or two where Xi Jinping actually feels a certain sense of powerlessness. People are thinking that China's going to be able to look after itself. But maybe these tariffs are not going to be so easy for China. And China may not actually know what to do, may not know how to respond. I mean, they could respond. I mean, Mars in Cancer is something which it's quite a combative place for Mars, looking after its own interests, looking after his country's interests. That is a way of looking at Mars. But when you've got Saturn and Neptune square, it really could be difficult. So he may not be the best leader for China at the moment. I mean, I don't have a time of birth for him, but I'm just not convinced that he's going to completely manage this, as he should. We don't know exactly where his moon is, but he probably has moon in Leo, so potentially he's got the Saturn and Pluto opposition his moon. And with that Saturn-Neptune conjunction, someone who's got a close Saturn-Neptune conjunction is a person who's going to be very much influenced by what's happening around him. And there must be a lot of fear about instability. Like many people in China, the Cultural Revolution was completely devastating. His family were persecuted. But he somehow managed to deal with the situation. I think his sister died, and it was bad, and he was forced to work in the fields, as so many people were in the Cultural Revolution. But he was able to, with his sun in Gemini, was able to sort of twist things, move things around, and from a position of complete disadvantage, take on a position of leadership and work his way up through the Communist Party. But he knows how things can change, I think, and so we've certainly got an economic revolution, so his Saturn Neptune conjunction is really starting to feel it. And I will be looking at this Saturn Neptune conjunction in greater detail, because it is a thing all on its own, and I don't want to go into too much detail here, but it's something we need to really start to be aware of. Now, one final point about Xi Jinping is he is born very close to Donald Trump, assuming he really was born at June the 15th, 1953. So that does mean that they have a certain connection Trump and Xi Jinping. Trump's sun at 2256 Gemini, Xi Jinping's sun at around 24 Gemini. So that does mean that there is potentially a line of communication there. And Xi Jinping's Saturn is quite close to Trump's Jupiter. So there is a possibility, looking at it from Xi Jinping's point of view. Xi Jinping's Saturn is quite strong. It's in Libra, and it's exalted. It's right on Trump's Jupiter. So Trump's Jupiter, that's his plans, the way he wants to expand things, expand America, his vision. But Xi Jinping's Saturn-Neptune conjunction is right on his Jupiter. So maybe with Saturn-Neptune conjunction, Xi Jinping can actually manage the forces of chaos because he knows about the forces of chaos, perhaps because of his experience as a teenager during the Cultural Revolution. He knows that these things sometimes happen, that you can't take things for granted. And maybe that Saturn-Neptune conjunction is going to be able to stop Trump in his tracks or really diminish Trump's freedom of action. Don't forget that Vladimir Putin was born in 1952. So Vladimir Putin has his Saturn at around this part of Libra. You look at Vladimir Putin's chart. So Vladimir Putin also has a Saturn-Neptune conjunction at 17 and 21 Libra. And so that is one thing that Vladimir Putin and Xi have in common. They have this Saturn-Neptune conjunction, and both in the past have experienced massive change, like Putin and the fall of the Soviet Union. I will be talking more about Putin and Xi and the Saturn and Neptune conjunction in a later video, but I just wanted to introduce this. And if you think that I've been forgetting about China, I'm not forgetting about China, and I do need to talk more about China. So thank you very much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did enjoy this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there's a link in the description, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.